Hard times, hard wiring. About 8,200 years ago, the climate threw humanity a curveball. A massive pulse of meltwater from collapsing ice sheets spilled into the oceans, disrupting weather patterns around the globe. Temperatures dropped, rainfall shifted, and for several brutal centuries, many regions became colder, drier, and less predictable. Sea levels likely dropped noticeably around the world. For people already living on the edge, this was a stress test. Fields failed, herds shrank, rivers changed their moods. In that kind of world, having the right instincts was not a luxury. It was the difference between making it through the lean years and disappearing. Just imagine the advantage for people who had certain tendencies. The gardener impulse, a near-obsessive drive to coax food out of the ground, to experiment with seeds, soils, and seasons. The sense of ownership. This field is ours. A willingness to defend land, canals, and harvests together. Conformism. The ability to live inside rules, follow group decisions, and keep large projects, like irrigation systems, running. Stubborn optimism. A bias toward believing that if you plant again, dig again, try again, next year might be better. Herding and petting. A knack for calming, managing, and eventually breeding animals instead of just hunting them. The art of the deal. Trading grain for animals, labor for water, favors for protection, turning social skill into survival. Research can, in principle, test whether any of these tendencies left a genetic trace. That's where ancient DNA and sediment DNA come in. Work being done by many research groups around the world, including Professor Vivian Sloan's team at Tel Aviv University. Here's a conundrum for the emerging field of ancient DNA. Did natural selection actually nudge us toward traits like a gardener instinct, a strong sense of ownership, conformity, stubborn optimism, herding, and deal-making? Or are we looking at purely cultural adaptations that just happen to feel innate? In a harsher, less forgiving climate, those traits didn't just make life easier. They could tilt the odds of survival. Communities that could organize, share work, and stick to common plans had a better shot at getting through a bad decade or a bad century. Shared beliefs became part of this survival toolkit. Groups that could rally around stories, rituals, and rules, sometimes even at great personal cost, were often better at coordinating large numbers of people. Regardless of the impact of genetics behind it, a tendency to commit to group norms and sacred rules, even when it hurts, could help keep the group itself alive. That ancient climate crisis may have pushed us to build more permanent homes, to organize more tightly, and to think longer term, planting not just seeds, but the roots of cities. Rough life. Such a boom in technology, population, and surpluses came with a price. The new farming lifestyle didn't just create more food, it created even more advantage for those within the community who were smarter, more cunning, or better organized. Land and surplus grain became resources you could hoard, inherit, and fight over. Property, social hierarchies, and class divisions weren't abstract ideas. They were baked into who got to eat well and who didn't. In a world where some families had fields, herds, and storage pits while others scraped by, it was impossible to keep everyone happy. Our ancestors were not blank slates. They already carried deep instincts about status, fairness, and envy. Jealousy matters. Any wiring that made people sensitive to who had more, who was cheating, and who was breaking the rules could affect who survived, who rebelled, and who got pushed to the margins. Those who were driven to compete for status, to win, and to always push for more, often ended up building more complex, tightly organized societies, sometimes for better, often for worse. Some societies and social systems flourished, while others vanished. Unlike the more flexible, overlapping tasks in many hunter-gatherer groups, early agrarian societies increasingly divided work by sex or special talents. Heavy field labor, long-distance trade, and organized warfare skewed toward men. Childcare, food processing, and household management were pushed toward women. In crowded villages and early cities, it often made harsh economic sense to keep more men around as workers, guards, and soldiers. Men adapted to this role, but the cost was high. In a world of walled towns and rival city-states, there was constant pressure on young men to prove themselves in battle, to defend our fields and our walls. Those willing to risk, and sometimes lose, their lives in conflict were also the ones who, when they survived, could gain status, resources, and mates. Over thousands of years, that brutal filter helped reinforce a dangerous combination: the capacity to live in large, rule-bound societies, and the willingness to fight to the death when given the opportunity. A highly selective moral system emerged. Violence against them could be celebrated, while violence within the group was strongly condemned. Love and land. One consequence of agriculture was a shift in mating systems. The rise of farming introduced social and economic changes that made institutionalized monogamy more advantageous and more widespread. Settlement and food production in one location led to population growth, and with it, competition over land. Fertile soil became a valuable resource, and those who controlled the best plots could produce more food, support larger families, and accumulate more power. In this new world, reproduction took on a different meaning. Having more children, especially sons, meant more labor in the fields, more defenders for the walls, and more heirs to inherit land and status. Families were no longer just groups of relatives. They became small economic and political units tied to specific pieces of ground. As land became scarce and its value rose, disputes over territory became more common and violence more organized. Battles were no longer just about raiding food or livestock. They were about defending boundaries, inheritance, and the right to stay put. In that environment, social systems that linked long-term pair bonds, inheritance rules, and land ownership together, often in the form of monogamous marriage, had a powerful advantage in keeping property, power, and family lines intact. The birth of technology and trade. Having more food available and needing to work less for it meant something new entered the human schedule: free time. Being able to eat breakfast and then go about your day while your body slowly processed the carbs created hours that weren't spent chasing, digging, or foraging for every bite. Once free time appears, all bets are off. People can develop new technologies, mechanize tasks, to carve out even more free time, build philosophies, ideologies, and religions, invent and refine fashions, create music and other arts. Feeding large, settled populations demanded constant innovation. Early farmers started with simple tools, digging sticks and stone sickles, but necessity kept pushing them forward. Over centuries, they engineered irrigation channels, granaries, and other storage systems, and practices like crop rotation and fallowing to protect soil fertility. None of this appeared overnight. It was the cumulative result of trial and error, careful observation, and hard lessons from failed harvests. As surpluses grew, so did specialization. Not everyone needed to farm. Some became craftspeople, rulers, or traders. With people producing different goods and services, exchanging items became more complex, prompting the development of trade networks and, eventually, systems of currency to standardize value. Agriculture laid the foundation for human civilization and made it scalable. Domestication also extended beyond crops. Animals like sheep, goats, pigs, and cattle were tamed for meat, hide, and bone. Plants and animals became human-engineered systems, shaped by thousands of years of intentional, and sometimes accidental, selection. How farming spread. The genetic trail. Those same ancient DNA tools, in labs around the world, including Professor Vivian Slon's group at Tel Aviv University, also answer a different question. Not just what traits might have been favored, but how far the farmers themselves actually moved. For years, scientists debated how agriculture spread from its origins in the Levant and Anatolia into Europe. Did local hunter-gatherers adopt new techniques through contact? Or did farming itself arrive with waves of migrating people? The answer became clearer with the rise of ancient DNA technology. Genetic analyses of Neolithic bones revealed that early European farmers were not simply locals who learned to grow crops. They were descendants of migrants from the Near East. These early farmers carried distinct genetic signatures that matched populations in the Fertile Crescent, showing that farming spread through human movement, not just cultural diffusion. As they moved, these groups met the indigenous hunter-gatherers of Europe. Sometimes they mixed, interbreeding and blending genes, lifestyles, and technologies. Other times, the story was less peaceful. Evidence of population turnover and abrupt shifts in ancestry suggest episodes of conflict, displacement, and competition for land. Ancient DNA has transformed our understanding of this period, offering concrete evidence that it wasn't just farming ideas that moved. It was the farmers themselves, and not always by invitation. Wheat, the accidental partner. Wheat is a poster child of the agricultural revolution, but it didn't start as the golden, fluffy grain we know today. Picture a patch of wild grass on a windy hillside, thin stalks, small heads, and brittle seeds that shatter and scatter at the slightest touch. Great for the plant, terrible for anyone trying to fill a basket. Now imagine a few early farmers standing there, tired and hungry, noticing that some stalks are different. Their seeds are a little larger, the heads stand out more, and when you grab them, more grain actually ends up in your hand than on the ground. Those are the ones they pull and bring back to camp. Next season, without thinking of genetics or artificial selection, they replant the seeds from those easy-to-harvest plants. Repeat that quiet choice, year after year, family after family, village after village, and something remarkable happens. The wheat starts to change. It shatters less. Its seeds get bigger and cling to the stalk instead of flying away. Out in the wild, that would be a disaster for the plant. But in the new human-made world, it's a winning strategy, because people have become its dispersal system. Wheat slowly evolves into a crop that can't really survive without us, and we, in turn, begin to depend on it. Archaeobotanical evidence from the Fertile Crescent shows that this transformation began around 12,000 years ago and unfolded gradually over millennia. It wasn't obvious or effortless. It demanded patience, memory, and long-term trial and error. The people who mastered this slow, careful work of testing, waiting, and selecting were the ones whose fields stayed full when others failed. Wheat's ability to provide storable, calorie-rich, and dependable food made it one of the most notorious partners in our history, a cornerstone of early state building, and a plant that quietly rewrote what human life could look like. The revolution that never ended. The agricultural revolution wasn't a single moment. It was a slow-motion experiment that's still running. It reshaped how we eat, live, pair up, raise children, and draw the boundaries of us and them. It gave us cities, governments, economies, and epidemics. It made room for art, writing, and science, but also for hierarchy, warfare, and environmental damage on a planetary scale. In many ways, we're still riding the momentum of that ancient pivot. Every bite of bread, every pet in your home, every village that grew into a megacity traces its roots back to the moment some humans decided to stay in one place and grow something. The agricultural revolution wasn't just a shift in how we get food. It turned wild grasses and scattered bands of primates into the raw material for civilizations, and into the people we are today.